I love the Plane Crazy chapter. I was out there.
Yeah.
Did I look good?
Yeah.
Was I entertaining? Was I charming?
You taught me how to draw Mickey Mouse.
That's right. I remember that. Yes. No. Love that chapter. Great chapter out there. And then I hooked up with the Southeast Michigan chapter through you guys, so I appreciate that as well. But you guys are jam-packed. You know, for instance. The real reason Carl got that certificate is so that he could show off his new hip. How he would get up and walk over, get that, all that. So that was worth it to me to hear that. I did bring some of my books here to autograph, so at break we can do that. And afterwards, I talked with some of you. If you brought my books and you want those autographed, I can do that. If you brought books from any other author, I will be more than happy to autograph as well. Because I'm just that kind of guy. Just kind of happy and want to make you guys happy as well. So we can do that. But we're here today to celebrate Donald Duck. And it's very, very exciting because, of course, this month, June 9th, was Donald's official birthday, although Walt Disney always considered Donald's birthday Friday the 13th. So we're only one day late from celebrating his birthday. And in fact, if you see a lot of the Donald Duck cartoons, or you see some of the publicity releases or from the company, a lot of times it is Friday the 13th. Whenever Friday the 13th is, that's Donald's birthday. Now, Disney didn't celebrate Donald's 80th this year. Shame on them, just as they didn't celebrate Mickey's birthday. Because marketing has told Disney that if you say Donald is 80 years old, then kids are so stupid that they'll think he's just a old character rather than a timeless character. You know, for that to happen. And so they haven't celebrated those birthdays, and I think that's a real shame, especially in terms of Disney wants to sell merchandise and all this. This is the thing to do with that. And of course, we all love Donald Duck because secretly, we've all wanted to be Mickey Mouse because Mickey Mouse is brave and he's funny and he's kind to his friends, and that's who we really want to be. But we all know in our heart of hearts we're really Donald Duck. We're greedy, we're frustrated, we cause mischief, and all of that, and that's why people love Donald Duck. And people love Donald Duck around the world because in any language, nobody can understand anything that he says at all. So from an animation standpoint, they always had to do, you know, pantomime poses in order to get that through. And in fact, if you watch some of the Disney television shows, you notice that when Donald talks, it's always followed by somebody else talking. So Donald will go, and Jimmy Donald will go, yes, Donald, around the world. That's how that works. And again, one of the reasons I love talking with all of you guys is because you are all so sophisticated. Because when I say Donald Duck, none of you just immediately break out in laughter. You're too sophisticated. You do realize Donald Duck, Duck is feminine. Drake is masculine. So Donald took his mother's name because Donald is illegitimate. And in fact, Walt himself, see, you come to these things, you know, not because of me, you come to these things, so now you go to your family and friends and go, well, you know, Donald Duck is feminine. Duck is the feminine. And not one of them go, oh, were you listening to Jim Korkis? They go, oh, you know so much. You know yes, it was feminine. Even Walt knew that. And when he did an interview with Pete Martin for the book that his daughter supposedly wrote about Walt, the story of Walt Disney, in an excerpt that they did not include in the book, Walt says, yeah, we laugh around the studio, you know. He's a bastard. And that was Walt's term for that, for Donald. He didn't have the same affection for Donald as he did for Mickey. And when you see Donald waddle around and all that, and you laugh and you laugh and you laugh, what you should be laughing at is that is not how a duck waddles. That is how a goose waddles. And so they did that in an exaggerated format there to get that light. And why isn't he wearing pants? Because he doesn't look good in pants in the first place. But second off, not in pants, so you can immediately identify him as a duck. And of course the tail feathers go back and forth almost like a hand, and that creates some of the comedy that's going on. And what about that outfit he's wearing? I know, I laugh about it too. Oh, Jim, tell us. That's why we ask you to come. You know these things, Jim. That is not. I know you think, oh well, it's a sailor suit, and of course, water and sailors and all of that. That's how that connection is. It's not an American sailor suit. No member of the U.S. Navy ever wore a suit like that. It's actually a French sailor suit. That little midi blouse with that and the little hat with the tassel, it was French. So why are they sticking Donald Duck in a French Navy outfit? Of course Jim Korkis has an answer. He wouldn't bring up questions that he can't answer because he wants to look smart. All right, what that was in the early 1900s, the French gave to the Queen of England for her new son a little French Navy outfit. And this little kid wore it all the time, and it became a fashion statement. And so kids in England were wearing that suit, and then it even went over to France, and people in France were wearing the little midi blouses with the ties. Google this and you'll find this, and it came over to America. So again, it was the type of outfit that you would put a young boy in, and sometimes young girls. There was a variation of that for that, so it signified a young kid, you know, going through that. Also, it was the same type of outfit that was being worn on the Broadway stage for musicals, because it was much more distinctive than a U.S. Navy suit. So again, to be more flamboyant on stage and all that. So people who saw Donald Duck just immediately accepted it. Well, that's right. You know, yes, we've seen that. We get that, all of that. And it's only decades later that people go, wait a minute, there's something here that's not quite right. Now, Donald, of course, a lot of his birth is tied to his voice, done by Clarence Nash. Clarence Nash lived in Glendale, California. I happened to grow up in Glendale, California, so I got to meet Clarence Nash several times. In fact, one time walking home from school, he was out on his front lawn, and we started to talk. And he told me a joke that I just thought was hilarious, because I had no sense of humor whatsoever. He said, you know, my parents always wanted me to grow up to be a doctor, but they're still proud of me because I became the biggest quack in the world. Since I laughed so hard, every time I saw him after that, he would repeat that joke to me. And I would laugh. And I would laugh as that happened. Clarence was born actually in Oklahoma. And when he was 13 years old, he got his, he grew up on a farm. He was given his, what turned out to be his final childhood pet, which was this little baby billy goat. It was only a couple of weeks old. And he would feed the billy goat, and whenever he pulled away the bottle, this little billy goat named Mary would just start to squeal and all of this, you know, like a frightened little girl. And Clarence, his hobby was imitating barnyard animals, and he heard this and was just so unique, he tried to mimic it and then tried to put words to that, and then came up with a little poem, Mary Had a Little Lamb, that he did in that duck voice. And could form the words and do Mary Had a Little. He did it for a talent show, people loved it, and unfortunately it got him so excited that he quit school and went on the vaudeville circuit, where he did animal impressions and bird calls, and then he would finish, the big encore was to do Mary Had a Little Lamb. However, it didn't occur to Clarence that vaudeville would soon die. He thought he had a job forever. It didn't. So he came to LA, and he got on a local radio show called The Merrymakers, where he would do animal impersonations and bird calls. The Ador Milk Company. Some of you may remember that, and some of you may remember that once upon a time, milkmen would actually come to your door and deliver milk. You know, and you would leave, I'd like the buttermilk here, I'd like this, whatever. And so Ador Milk Company hired him to promote drinking milk for school children. And so they gave him a little wooden cart pulled by 6 miniature horses and dressed him up, and he was whistling Clarence, the Ador Birdman. And so he would go to schools and he would do assemblies, and the educational part is he would do the animal impersonations and the bird calls, so that seemed educational. And then he would do Mary Had a Little Lamb and all of these other things, and people just loved that. To help out a friend, he did this for about 2 years. To help out a friend, he went and did one more Merrymakers show doing this, little knowing, and he did it for free just to help out his friend, little knowing that Walt Disney was in a late story meeting, and Ted Osborne, who was producing the show, was a Disney story man, and so Osborne wanted to hear, you know, how the show was going, so he turned on the radio, and Walt heard Clarence do this. And Walt goes, "We need to find that guy." 2 days later, Clarence is driving his little cart down Hyperion, and people had kept saying, "You should go to Disney, they do all these animals, they would love to hear these voices," and all of this. So he pulled in and he went to the receptionist, and he had a little resume to give, and then he did some bird calls, and of course when you're trying to impress an attractive young woman, you pull out your A material. So here comes Mary Had a Little Lamb. And she said, I think they may be interested. So 2 days later he was called back for an audition. He was in Wilfred Jackson's office. Jackson was a director at the Disney Studios. He also ended up directing Wise Little Hen, which was the first Donald Duck cartoon. And he's hearing Clarence do turkeys and baby coyotes and pigs and horses. And listen, everything you may have read about Clarence is absolutely true. He was fun, he was energetic, he was non-stoppable. You think it'll take bulls to pull me off of this stage. Clarence would talk to the bulls. Leave him here on stage, because he would do that. And so as Jackson was listening to this, he flicked on his intercom that went directly to Walt's office. And so this sound of doing Mary Had a Little Lamb goes into Walt's office. Walt hears this, comes running into the room, points at Clarence and goes, "That's our talking duck!" And Clarence, of course, was smart enough to say, "You're absolutely right, Mr. Disney." He didn't say, "No, that's actually a baby goat, you know, that I used to have as a kid." However, Walt knew he wanted a talking duck, but he didn't know what he wanted to do with a talking duck. And at first he was really thinking of, this should be a girl duck, you know, and they just couldn't come up with a storyline and all this, so he's working with this story. So he put Clarence on retainer for a year, so Clarence still kept working as the Ador, whistling Clarence, the Ador Birdman. But he would come in and he would occasionally do animal voices for Disney cartoons. The very first one was for the birds in the Mickey Mouse short, The Pet Store, where Mickey is running a pet store and there's a huge gorilla and all of that. And so Clarence was free to take, he was just on retainer, so he was free to take other jobs. Now, Walt Disney used to have a partner by the name of Iwerks. Now, this has all taken place in 1933. Iwerks had left the Disney studio in 1930 for a variety of reasons, and had set up his own animation studio. And gosh darn it, he had heard Clarence on the radio as well. So he invited Clarence to come in, and he says, you know, we're working on a new cartoon right now, and I think you would be terrific to supply voices. And so Clarence came over and he said, and what cartoon are you doing? And he says, it's called The Red Little Hen. It's based on that classic story of the hen who goes around and says, who will help me plant my corn, who will help me harvest my corn, who will help me grind my corn, and all of that. And Clarence said, oh, okay. And Clarence went and phoned Walt Disney, and he says, I've just been offered this job. Should I take it? I know I'm not under contract to you, but you've tossed a lot of work at me, for me. You've been very nice. Should I take this? But Walt wasn't in the office, and so Clarence just left the message and then went out to do the 8-oar Birdman. Walt called back a dozen times, according to the 8-oar switchboard office there, and said, don't do a blank thing for iWorks, period. And because Walt, at the same time, was developing the exact same story, Wise Little Hen, and was thinking of Clarence as the duck. And so he mentioned to, Walt mentioned to Pinto Colvig, who did the voice of Goofy and was a story man there, he says, you know, this guy is just really loyal. He could have taken this job. He was under no obligation to contact me. But he did. I'm going to hire him. And so he brought in Clarence, and he hired Clarence. Clarence was the 125th employee ever hired at the Disney studio. Now, again, you can't make a living just doing those voice sounds and get your full salary. So Walt gave him all sorts of other jobs to do, like work at the receptionist desk to take in artist portfolios. He actually took in Frank Thomas's portfolio, and Frank Thomas told me, he said, yeah, I figured he was like a big executive at Disney because he was taking the artist portfolios and sending them in for processing. Clarence was a chauffeur. Sometimes when celebrity guests came to the Disney studios, Clarence was used as a chauffeur. Clarence did all of these things. And of course, his name was never revealed because Walt felt, especially in the early days, that a voice was just part of the overall character. The voice was an important part, but artists, the artist conceptions, you know, and all of that was important. The story and the lines given by the writers, all of that combined to make the character, you know. So you can't just say, oh yes, Adriana Casalati is Snow White. No, there were a lot of other people, Grim Natwick, you know, Art Babbitt, all of this, who contributed to create that character that you think of that. So Clarence was unknown for many, many years until a newspaper sort of blurted out that yes, he's the one who's doing this, and Walt wasn't happy, but Clarence was so personable and all that, he'd be trotted out to radio shows and for interviews and all that, that was the one exception where it just started to slide there. Clarence passed away shortly after Donald's birthday in 1984 from leukemia. He never told anybody he had leukemia because he did not want to spoil Donald's 50th birthday celebration. Because it was huge, you know. Donald Duck had been drafted. I'm doing pretty well in terms of time. I'm really proud of myself. See, that's the most important thing. Donald had officially been drafted into the Army as Donald Fauntleroy Duck in 1941, but he had never been decommissioned from the Army. So on his 50th birthday, he was fine. Huh?
That's great.
He
was never decommissioned.
Yeah, he was actually the last person from World War II to be, and he had made it up to Buck Sergeant at that time. So they had a whole full ceremony where the Army came and, you know, gave the stripes and all that. Well, Clarence didn't want any of these things to be upset. In fact, he was scheduled to, again, Glendale. Glendale had a float in the Rose Parade, January 1st, 1985, and it was all devoted to Donald Duck. And Clarence was going to ride on the float, and I got to meet him again and talk with him, but I could tell he wasn't, you know, 100%. And in fact, the night before the Rose Parade, he was taken to the Glendale Hospital, so he was not able to ride on the float. And in fact, Tony Anselmo, who's the voice of Donald today, said that one of his greatest tragedies is that he drove miles to come to the Rose Parade just to see Clarence Nash on the float, and he wasn't there. And Clarence passed away a couple of weeks right right after that, unfortunately. His last public appearance, believe it or not, was in Watogna, Oklahoma, where it was declared Clarence Nash Day, and they renamed a street, Clarence Nash Street, in his honor for that to happen. Now, Donald, of course, his popularity soared during World War II because Mickey was just too nice. If you take a look at the patches and all of this, Mickey was on the Chaplain patch, was on a communication patch, things like that. Everybody wanted Donald Duck because he had this temper, you know, and he was a fighter, and this is what, you know, they wanted to do. So whereas Mickey appeared on 12 to 15 insignias, Donald was on 90. And in fact, they literally had to put a hold and said, no other service can request Donald Duck anymore, because we got nothing but Donald Duck out there. Donald Duck, by the way, was nominated for an Academy Award 11 times, but only won once. Any guess what that cartoon was? The Fuhrer's Face, which again was originally going to be called Donald Duck in Nutsy Land. And in Nutsy Land, yes, he's working there. It's a terrible, terrible situation. You know, his bread is a block of wood that he has to saw. He has one bean that he dips into, you know, a cup of water to drink and all that. And of course, at the end, he discovers that it's all a dream and that he's glad to be a citizen of the United States. However, that's on Disney's Do Not Show list because, again, the implications of Nazis and things like that. But that's the only time he won an Academy Award, and yet we're not allowed to see this because we are not sophisticated enough to understand this. You know, that this was taken at a different time and a different place for that. As some of you know, that Donald is actually a mascot for a football team, the Oregon Ducks. Now, there's an interesting story about that, is that the coach of the Ducks was actually the brother of Phil Harris. You know, who later did the voice of Baloo and all this, but again he was a band leader and all this, and a friend of Walt Disney's. And so Phil says, well, can you help these guys out here, because they had been drawing ducks, and as you draw a duck, eventually it becomes more and more looking like Donald Duck. And so Walt flew up to Oregon and said, oh yeah, sure. It was just a handshake deal. And they have a photo of Walt in the jacket with Donald as the mascot and all of that. But for Walt, everything was a handshake deal. So there was no documentation. So 10 years after Walt passed away, Disney was going to shut Oregon down. And all Oregon had was this black and white photo of a smiling Walt with the coach and with the mascot and all of that as proof that Walt said, yes, you can do this. But the Disney company required a written contract, and also a written contract saying that Disney would get X amount of percentage of merchandise from the Oregon Duck and all that. But Donald has had a very, very colorful career. The Disney company operates different now than when Walt was alive, as you may know. In fact, I just authored a new book that was just published 2 weeks ago. It's available on Amazon. It's so new I don't have copies today to sell to you. It's called Who's the Leader of the Club? Walt Disney Leadership Lessons. So there are so many books about how the Disney company is run today. Be Our Guest, Disney U, all of those that are out there. This is the only book about how Walt and Roy ran the company. So the first section is devoted to leaders and managers and uses examples of Walt and Roy. And so there's a Walt Disney quote or several on every page, plus a Walt Disney story on every page. So if you're not interested in business, this still may be interesting to you. The middle section is 7 lessons that, Walt did as a leader. you know, and why he did those, why those are effective, and now how you could use those if you were managing a little league team or a hospital or whatever, or dealing with a PTA, whatever. There's that. And then the third section, I deal with all the mistakes that Walt made as a leader, plus how Walt went about letting people go, which is much different than how the Disney company does it today. I will tell you from personal experience. There's a section on Walt and money. There are quotes, and again, all of this is filled with quotes from Walt himself or Roy, or from people who worked directly with them. So that's called Who's the Leader of the Club? Walt Disney Leadership Lessons. So we hope this will be an interesting book that people will want, but it's available on Amazon now, so you can take a look at that. But getting back to Donald, because we're running out of time here quickly. With that, for that to happen, there's a lot of legends and urban myths surrounding Donald. For instance, one of the ones that some of you may know is, oh yes, Donald Duck was banned in Finland because he was not wearing pants, and he was raising three children out of wedlock there, Huey, Dewey, and Louie, which, by the way, were named after Huey Lewis, you know, the southern governor there, and John Dewey, and Huey Long, and Huey Lewis in the news. Huey Long, John Dewey, who we know beat Truman because it was in the newspaper, and Louis Schmidt, who was a very political activist at the Disney studio. That's where Huey, Dewey, and Louie came about for that. But anyway, Donald being banned was not true. Basically what it was there were the local libraries in Finland were experiencing budget cuts. So they decided not to renew their subscription to the Donald Duck comic books, you know, to try and save on money. And then so suddenly that got blown up, all out of mistranslation, that, oh yes, Finland feels that, you know, Donald is morally reprehensible. No, he isn't. They just didn't have any money. As soon as they got some more money, they had the comic books, you know, reinstated as part of their subscription for that to happen. And again, Adria has been so kind to put together Donald Duck's family tree. A lot of that was just because you needed new characters in order to come up with new stories, because there's only a certain number of Donald Duck stories that you can come up with. And in fact, there were a lot of Donald Duck stories, because sometimes they would start stories about Mickey Mouse, and Mickey Mouse would start to get roughed up, and Walt didn't want Mickey Mouse roughed up, you know? And also there were complaints from people in the audience, you know? You can't have Mickey hit first. You know, you can't have Han Solo fire first. You can't have Mickey hit first. You know, Pete has to do something horrendous for Mickey to hit him. You know, so a lot of those stories started to develop, and then they became Donald stories, because we all love to see Donald get into a fight, and then also what happened is it's even funnier to see him get his comeuppance. You know, at the end. Because again, his heart is so good and so true that, you know, we can go with that. Chip and Dale came about because they needed new characters for new storyboards. And how that happened is Jack Hanna, the very first Disney animator I ever interviewed in Glendale. And he said they were sitting around at a story meeting, and they were trying to bat around ideas, and they had some chipmunks that had appeared in a Pluto cartoon that they thought they could develop further, but you know, you wanted to give them a name so they had distinct personalities. And his secretary, Bea Selk, who was taking notes, and she was one of the voices of the chipmunks, sped up. She wanted to leave early because she was engaged, she was going to get married, she wanted to register, you know, at stores, because she wanted to make sure that people knew that one of the things she wanted was Chip and Dale furniture. Jack Hanna heard this and he says, "Yeah, go. We got the names now. This is it. This is how Chip and so that's how some of these things, happen."
Same Jack Hanna of Hanna-Barbera.
No, there's a different Jack Hanna. Actually, there's a Jack Hanna that has an H at the end. Hanna of Hanna-Barbera was Bill Hanna, who worked at MGM. He created Tom and Jerry and all of that. And then when MGM left, but yes, they got their mail, each other's mail, all the time. Sometimes Jack would laugh about that. Sometimes Jack would be Donald Duck.